Jumping In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. And here we are once again, Saturday night, 9 o'clock, Manx Radio, the Isle of Man, on the web. In your ears, it is Jumping In with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's Jumping In with another beach bag full of summer specials. I used to love those, didn't you? Your favourite comic only appeared to be about 10 times thicker. Unlike Jumping In, which is always packed full of rich and creamy, jazzy goodness, no matter what season it is. And to be truthful, in what has already been an extreme year, it's becoming increasingly hard to decide what season it is. For example, since when has August been in autumn? I must have missed the memo. So what have your pine cones and Weatherstones been suggesting to you this week, Edge?
Oh, don't get me going on the weather. We'll never get any music in. Yes, we will, talking about rich and creamy things, the latest magnum opus from the wonderful Maria Schneider. We were hoping to talk to her today. Unfortunately, we had to delay that, but we will be speaking to her in the next week or so. But we're going to have a sample from Date Lords in any case. A jazz birthday we missed because we were doing our special, one of the best jazz drummers of all time in my book, and a sad passing as well of a great tenor saxophonist.
And from me, well, we start downstairs, we have a quick look at a motorhome, we hear the view, and we start by stepping out with an old Joe Jackson favourite. Here's Charles Owens and 13. That
Oh,
was
live.
Saxophonist Charles Owens with the Randazzo Big Band. We actually played that, the Randazzo Big Band's own album a little while ago, recorded live at the Southern Cafe and Music Hall in Charlottesville, Virginia. Taken from an interesting double CD release from last year called 3 and 13, which had one disc with his trio of Charles on sax, Andrew Randazzo, hence the Randazzo Big Band, on bass, and Devon Harris on drums, and the second, disc 13 with the Randazzo Big Band, 13 of them in all, you'll be surprised to hear, giving an energetic workout there to the old Joe Jackson classic, Steppin' Out.
Marvellous stuff. Yes, thoroughly enjoyable that. Nice way to get going. Jumping in, of course, with Chris and H. Lovely to have you along as ever. Any thoughts, by the way? Always drop us a line. Chris Kane at manxradio.com or Howard Kane at manxradio.com. And don't forget the Kane is Caine if you've got any thoughts or anything you'd like to hear. I did notice a week or two back that there was a birthday. We like to mark some noticeable jazz birthdays from time to time. And as we were thinking about our jazz special, our bass special, so that was sort of keeping us occupied. However, I did notice that Mr. Jack DeJohnette, one of the greatest jazz drummers, certainly of the last 50 years, arguably ever, well, not arguably, I think ever in any case, but in modern times, certainly one of the most revered and adaptable and prolific, call it what you will, jazz players, a wonderful guy. Never got to interview him, spoken to him briefly, never managed to interview him yet. Keep our fingers crossed. If lockdown ever eases, we might possibly get round to it. Anyway, he enjoyed a birthday just a week or so back, and I made a note of it to think, yeah, a little bit of his music would be wonderful. So I've taken something from one of his more recent, you could pick anything really, with himself, with Special Edition, with Keith Jarrett, you name it, Charles Lloyd, etc., etc. I've gone for one from just a couple of years ago, 2016, In Movement with Ravi Coltrane, yeah, that's right, son of, that other Coltrane, and Matthew Garrison, who is indeed Jack DeJohnette's godson, I believe, on bass. Great album on ECM called In Movement, and from that we're going to hear In Movement. Lovely stuff. Do like that one. In Movement. Jack DeJohnette with Ravi Coltrane on soprano sax there by the sound of it. Matthew Garrison, Jack's godson, I believe, on electric bass and electronics, and Jack himself playing drums and some electronic percussion. He also plays piano on one or two of the tracks from an ECM release from a few years ago, 2016. And it's a happy birthday to Jack just a week or so back. 78, unbelievably, he is now.
And again, another man who doesn't look a day older, sadly, unlike the rest of us. Now, ever since we first came across Polish jazz and started to feature it on the show, I've had a couple of firm faves in the trumpet section. Thomas Stanko, of course, who we're very fortunate to get the opportunity to interview the great man, and also this man, Jerzy Malek. From his latest release, Black Sheep, let's hear In the Basement. Lovely stuff. In the Basement, from the 8th album by Polish jazz trumpeter-composer Jerzy Malek, recorded with his quintet of saxophonist Radek Nowicki, pianists Piotr Wajzolo or Aga Derlik, bassist Max Mucha, drummer Sebastian Frankiewicz. The album's got 7 Malek originals and certainly won't disappoint, and it's worth, again, picking up any of his. Great thanks to Steve at stevejazzsounds.co.uk for sending us that.
Lovely stuff, yeah, and I can vouch for that one as well. I've had it in the car the last week or so, and most enjoyable indeed, that one, Jerzy Malek. Wonderful stuff. You might have seen, yes, sadly, we've lost another great jazzer, Steve Grossman. Perhaps not a headline name for some, but he was way up there with the best, perhaps best known for replacing Wayne Shorter in Davis's band in the later years when he was in the sort of fusion style. Also worked with Elvin Jones, of course, and his jazz machine. Also fronted more than 24 albums under his own name. A wonderful round full sound he had on tenor. Let's hear him from one on a DIW, actually. Came out in Japanese on the label quite some time ago. This one, 1985, November 1985. A selection of him doing standards, 803 standards it was known. Steve on tenor, Fred Henk on piano, Walter Booker bass, and Masahiro Yoshida at the drums. And this is Easy Living. remembering Steve Grossman there, who sadly passed away at the age of 69 just a few days ago. Steve, lovely, wonderful, round, warm sound on the tenor, and like I said, played with Miles Davis and goodness knows who else, but there, just with his own band, Fred Henk, Walter Booker, Masahiro Yoshida, I think recorded in Japan by the looks of it. It was issued in the 1980s on DIW, but all the notes are in Japanese, which would seem to suggest that. And just an album called Standards. Well, actually it says 803 Standards, but I do think the 803 is possibly the DIW catalogue number, but I'm guessing there.
Now, speaking of Miles, the relationship between jazz and flamenco stretches back a long way, of course. Sketches of Spain and Billy Jenkins' wonderfully humorous Scratches of Spain, but now, since moving to the United States some years ago, pianist Alex Conde has continued to meld the flamenco styling with Latin American, Afro-Caribbean influences. And on the track we're about to hear, Boulerie Jazz, there is even a nod to Duke. See if you can spot it.
Hello, I'm Julia Hülsmann. You're listening to Jumping In with Chris and H.
How about that?
Okay.
I've been enjoying that one a lot over the last week. The latest magnum opus from the wonderful Maria Schneider. It's a double CD called Data Lords. Some angry, dense, powerful music sort of rebelling against the digital world, free streaming and the massive corporations who she sees as really sort of dominating our lives now, amongst other things. That one's called A World Lost, with Ben Monda taking solo and guitar, Rich Perry as well on tenor. And it's also a much broader look at a whole sort of view on how the digital world is beginning to nullify people's brains to a degree. If you read some of the wonderful notes, because it's a beautifully packaged artist share release. Since last summer, an old high school classmate told me how kids in our hometown no longer socially gather to the degree we used to. He said kids largely keep isolated, drawn into their individual electronic worlds. Looking back, I can recall staring out the window, sometimes horribly bored. The moments weren't fun, but sitting there long enough, I had an imaginary world which eventually filled the void, and she feels that this is something now which no longer exists. Terrific stuff. We're hoping to speak to her in a couple of weeks, and we'll play more then.
And before that, we had Boulerie Jazz from Spanish pianist Alex Con's 2018 album Origins, perhaps putting me in mind of Spain from Chicoria. And did you spot the Duke in amongst it all?
Yeah, a bit of Caravan, I think, wasn't it?
A bit of Caravan. Alex on piano, his septet with many great players, Brian Lynch on trumpet, the wonderful Dinah Stevens on sax, Marcus Gilmore on drums. And thanks for Rope-a-Dope for sending us that, along with the Charles Owens I played earlier. Well, that's sadly about it for this week's edition of Jumping In. We've just got time to leave you with a track from guitarist Rob Luft's latest edition on Edition Records, Life is a Dancer, with the original band from his debut Riser of Joe Wright on tenor sax, Joe Webb on piano and Hammond, Tom McCready on bass, and the inimitable Corey Dick on the drum kit, plus a couple of guests. We'll leave you with Synesthesia.
Look after yourselves.
Bye for now.